How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another weekly NFL picks video on Riley's Redzone. We're looking forward to what is in store for football this week. Hope you're enjoying your week so far, and let's get right into what this week will be. If you're new here, every single week I predict who will win each NFL game, as well as since week 2 we've had a guest picker give their selections as well. Before diving into this week, just a quick recap. I went 10-5 last week, a good kind of get back for the week, and our guest picker Matthew went 9-6. So you can see the standings here. He's right in the middle there in the mix. We haven't had a guest picker go below 500, which I have to say is actually pretty impressive on the year. I'm 83-55 so far this season. Now for this week, we are going to have Danny be the guest picker, trying to climb those standings that you saw there, and so he'll give his selections as well. With that being said, let's dive right into it. Today, the Thursday night game, we got Bengals and Ravens. Bengals with a huge win over the Raiders last week. Are they back? I don't think they're quite at that team level that they made the AFC Championship a number of years ago. The Ravens are legit. They just smashed the Broncos 41-10. This is always, when you get divisional games, perhaps a little tricky, could be a trap. But just safe-wise here, I think the Ravens are still a top 3 team in football at home here in their new helmets too. Looking forward to seeing those domes. I definitely got to pick the Ravens here. That's where Danny goes as well. They are the favorite in that matchup. But then we're going to go to the Giants and the Panthers, a little morning game on Sunday, and two teams that are not exactly amazing at football based on what we've seen this season. But the Giants can't get past the Commanders last week. Daniel Jones is going to be a really big point of discussion by the end of the year, what they're going to do with that. But for now, he's their starting quarterback. Meanwhile, the Panthers pick up a win that ends up getting Dennis Allen fired for the Saints. We'll talk about them later. But the Panthers get a much-needed victory. And so I like that the Panthers got this win, but I feel like if there's an opportunity for the Giants to get back in the win column, it's got to be this game. If they don't, you really got to think about that panic button. So I'm going to go with the New York Giants as slight favorites. Danny's got the upset pick here in the Panthers, so that's a split that is going to be really interesting. I think they're both kind of bottom tier teams that either could win that matchup. Wouldn't be surprised to go either way there. Patriots and Bears. Patriots, what a game that was against the Titans. I mean, that last-second touchdown from Drake May thrown to the end zone, they're like, nobody's open, and then he just finds Ramondre Stevenson after running around for 50 minutes. I mean, it was just incredible, but they can't pull off the victory as the Titans end up winning that one in overtime. Meanwhile, the Bears, I thought that was going to be a tricky game to predict last week, that the Bears maybe could have won it. I picked the Cardinals. Luckily, I did, because my goodness, the Bears just couldn't put up as many points as they did, that the Cardinals did. And so I think this week they're really going to get back on track, but that's certainly an interesting thing to watch. I'm going to take Chicago here. So does Danny. I just feel like the Patriots are not a great football team. It says more so about that than the Bears, who are just going to be kind of treading here. I still don't know if Eberflus is the guy, even if they manage to squeak like a 500 record this year. I don't get the best vibes there. I think they could use a little bit more offensive power. But with that being said, I think they get a win this week. Niners, Bucks, two teams that have really just began to be really banged up on the season. The Bucks just can't quite beat the Chiefs last week, get about as close as anybody has this season, which is getting them to overtime, and just couldn't do it. The Niners are maybe going to slowly get some health back after it was great for them to have a bye week. Still a little banged up. I don't think they're the same quality of that team that has been so solid in the postseason these last few years, but here I'm going to go with the Niners to bounce back in their season, which is tough for the Bucks because I think that they are a little bit underrated, that they're still going to be a competitive football team despite injuries to their receivers and all that. I'm taking the Niners, so does Danny. Interesting game to watch, though, there for sure. Broncos, Chiefs, I almost want to do it again, but I've talked about so many times that it's going to be safer to pick the Chiefs. The Chiefs are going to drop a game at some point, but it really doesn't matter because they're still going to be favorites to win the Super Bowl. They're still going to be easily in contention. So they're going to just happen. And most of the time, it's going to be safer to just pick with them than against them because you're more likely to just get that victory. But a divisional game certainly changes things up here, though. I think that Denver is scrappy. They were destroyed last week, which I didn't think. I mean, I thought there was going to be makings of an entertaining game there. It was not. I think, are going to have a lot of motivation, and I really believe that this is a really close game, and I could see Denver pulling off this upset, but the truth is just being safe with the picks. I've already been burned by that stove a number of times picking against Kansas City. This is probably the game they lose because I do this, but I'm going to take Kansas City in this matchup. So does Danny. That's just a safe choice, even if Denver has a really solid shot of making some noise here. Bills and Colts. Bills are trending up. They get past the Dolphins in what was a great game there. But since they kind of mid-season, Josh Allen's looked great. They have enough supporting cast that they really are on the way up. The Colts finally commit to Joe Flacco as a quarterback, which I thought for right now is better than Anthony Richardson at the very moment, even though I've talked about last week. I don't know if I fully agree on the decision to commit for the whole season there, but you do it, and then they end up really laying an egg against the Vikings offensively, and so that's a big concern. I got to go Buffalo here. I just think it's more of a sure thing. Colts will pull off some wins with Flacco, but I'm going with Buffalo in that one, so does Danny. Steelers Commanders. This one's tricky to me because the Steelers get the benefit of coming off a bye. They get a little bit of extra time here. You'll see later in the video, I'm a huge trend breaker guy. I think that bounce back games are going to occur. I think that streaks are meant to be broken, that things kind of balance out by the end of things. And so the Commanders have been on such a roll that you're kind of like, how are they doing this? This is incredible. They are a legit team. I'm not doubting them whatsoever, but it's like they're going to probably drop a game sometime soon, you'd have to think. But they are a top 5 football team to me right now in the National Football League. Meanwhile, the Steelers, we just have seen kind of the limited action with Russ at that quarterback, but it's been going pretty well so far. So this is definitely another one where a lot of things could say that the Steelers make this interesting, but I'm going to take the safe choice, which is sticking with the team that's been winning, and that's the Washington Commanders. In this one, that's where Danny goes as well, but that's an interesting game to watch on because the Steelers are sneaky. Vikings, Jaguars. The Vikings get that much needed win against the Colts last week. If they lost that game, that changes things a little bit to me where I would have seen where they're at. But this is a solid football team that's probably going to be in the wild card and maybe could get one win in the postseason. That's kind of their ceiling to me, to what I'm seeing. I think we saw that even despite the win, Sam Darnold can be read. It's not perfect, but at the same time for Vikings, they're really great to see that they can bounce back in a game and really, just slow first half, let's get it together in the second, and they did so. The Jaguars just keep losing, and it's so hard because their talent level on that team, they have it, but Trevor Lawrence is questionable, their receiving room. I mean, I was yesterday at a Buffalo Wild Wings that you look on the TV, and they've got Parker Washington as a sleeper start player in fantasy. Potential future good player, but if that is somebody that you're looking to start, that's probably showing some injuries have occurred on that offense, and so I'm going to take the Vikings here. So does Danny. This is just kind of a gift for the Vikings potentially on the schedule, that I think this is a team that they could get a win against. Meanwhile, the Jaguars are just a little too banged up right now for me to go with Jacksonville. Falcons Saints. This is interesting. I've really started to rise on the Falcons. They entered the top 10 for me this week in the rankings. I think they've proved that easily right now they're the favorite in that division. I think that with Kirk Cousins at quarterback, you just get that stability that they're looking at, maybe not just a wild card. Maybe you can go a little bit further than that. They have a legit chance with Kirk Cousins at the quarterback spot. But I am a huge proponent of interim head coach, change, new players coming in and instantly that week making a difference. Now, they might fall off the track the next week, but that first game I really think can make a difference. So interim head coach Darren Rizzi and the fellas in New Orleans, I think that they go out and they get a win in this first game. The Saints, I also, with some of these, look up the history of these matchups, and the Saints have been pretty good against the Falcons over the last few years. So I'm going to take New Orleans. So does Danny. I made the picks, and I looked at what he had, and I was like, okay, we're both going with this underdog selection in the Saints. This is one of my bigger ones this week. We like the new change at that head coach spot, and it just sparks a little something, even if the Falcons, pound for pound, may be a better football team. Titans, Chargers. Titans get a victory, but it's not like I feel great about them. Still TBD on Will Levis and all the health of that, but they beat the Patriots, who I don't think are a great football team. Meanwhile, the Chargers beat the Browns, who now I think we've realized are also not a great football team, but they at least had some control in that game. And with a Jim Harbaugh-led team, if they can get a few more games like this on the schedule, they could maybe make their way back into that wild card race. And so I'm going with Los Angeles in this one, see if Herbert and the boys can get something to go offensively. Danny's going to go that direction as well. I think it's just you see the opponent, and I'm going to go with the Chargers here, who I did raise a little bit in the rankings this week. Jets and Cardinals. This is maybe one of the toughest games for me this week because I just don't like Jets games right now. They're so hard to pick because I literally said last week, they've been tricky where it was you have Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, like you got to be able to get wins. They played the Patriots. I mean, come on, you got to beat them, right? And they don't. And then they play the Steelers, and it's like, okay, we can't get anything to go. So then I finally fade on them. Pick against them last week. Okay, we're just going to take the Texans as underdogs, which Vegas knew what they were doing there. I mean, what was that? They knew exactly what was up there, and so I picked against them, and then they finally win. And so now it's tricky that I don't know what to make of them because now everyone's gonna put a little bit more eggs in that basket, and then it's just gonna be taken away. But what's tricky to me as well is they're playing an opponent who, to me, has been the most unpredictable team perhaps in the league this season, which is the Arizona Cardinals. Their roster, I've been a huge, and if you've been watching, I think Kyler Murray is very underrated in this league and has been for quite a while, and he's starting to gain some respect. I had to look up the standings again. They've won 3 games in a row. For that reason, I'm like, can this really continue? I'm at times, I mean, it was great for them to actually do it last week, which is why I'm concerned here because they finally put up a good performance. But on paper, most of the time, I've been shocked that their offense can get it done, but their defense with a defensive head coach hasn't been superior. But this last week, they actually put a pretty good performance up against the Bears. And so this is a tricky game to me. The Jets are somehow favorites here, and it's really, I talked about trend breakers. I'm going to take the Jets. I don't feel good about it. This is my least confident pick of the week. Danny's going to go with the Cardinals, which is very sensible. This is one where I just think that the Cardinals streak comes to an end. It's more so about that than it is me believing in the Jets at all because they've already broke you a few times. I can't really go back there. I don't think are going to perform to what we think they are. But the truth is that they maybe have potential as a team. So I'm going to go with the Jets, even though I don't feel great about that over the Cardinals. And the Eagles and the Cowboys. The Eagles, I mean, everyone's going to talk. That Saquon hurdle is one of the best plays I've ever seen. But the Cowboys going to be without Dak. The question is whether he goes on IR or not. I don't think they've officially done it at this time that I'm recording. It's also, are they going Cooper Rush? Are they going Trey Lance? It's one of those where Cooper Rush is probably the better quarterback right now, but you know exactly what he is, and he has no ceiling. I mean, you might as well be in a 5-foot home with that. There is not going to be potential there. With Trey Lance, there is, but you also at that point may be sacrificing the season. Now, I think that it might be worth just to see what you have in Lance, because at worst you could trade him in the future, maybe gain something if he really does prove to be somebody. I don't think you have anything to lose because to me this season's kind of, you can wave that flag. But the Eagles are a really good football team, and with the Cowboys already more banged up than they were, I'll take Philadelphia. Being on the road, they are favorites. So does Danny. I think that's the sensible choice in that matchup. Last 2 games of the week, and this is where I get a little off the rails. You might be thinking, Riley, you have only picked one upset so far this week. Well, stay tuned here. We got 2 games left. Lions and Texans. The Lions are a top 2 football team right now. They are an absolute wagon that cannot seem to be stopped. Doesn't matter where you play. Doesn't matter what it is. But I'll tell you this. The Houston Texans, yes, they lost to the New York Jets last week, which was not good. There's no way to twist that. That was not a good performance, and that is embarrassing. But DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud are going to have some motivation going into this week. And I think that this is another one where the streak comes to an end. The Lions are a great football team, and I think they win this game probably 8 out of 10 times if they were to play. If the Texans had not lost to the Jets last week, I'd probably be taking Detroit. But I'm feeling the Texans in a bounce-back game. Give me the underdog. Danny's going with the Lions there, but I think the Texans on that night game are going to show up for the crowd at home. I think that's another game changer there. And last game of the week, this is one that I think is a little tricky because the Rams, roster-wise, are just not the strongest we've ever seen them, but they have Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford, so they're never going to be not competitive in this football league, and so they always have a chance every week. The Dolphins are competitive against the Bills, but can't pick up a win despite Tua being back, and they've shown a little bit of things at times, but I don't know what to really make of either of these teams. This is another one where because the Rams won last week and the Dolphins lost last week, I think they flip-flop. I'm going with the Dolphins. So is Danny in this upset as well. We have another unanimous upset, but I'm picking up a couple, to me, in the end of the week where I think that those underdogs get victory. So that is the weekly NFL picks. We're going to quick do our fantasy league recap for those who maybe are new to the channel. We have a fantasy league going with all the guest pickers, at least of previous years, where at the end of the year we're going to have a reward and we're going to have punishments as well for top and last place. So you don't want to be last in this league. But to recap what happened last week, best manager went to Zach, who scored 147 points, and that was all of what he was able to do. That he left nobody on the bench. So that was the best manager. Worst manager was Max, who only scored 117 out of 153, and he still won because he played against me, who scored the lowest amount of points in the league. And I also got blown out the most. It says biggest blowout, meaning the margin of victory was the highest against myself, even though I played against a guy who was the worst manager. Yeah, it was not a great week for the squad. And so closest victory was 6 points for Matthew over Nick. We've seen a lot of closer games than that. And then the highest score was Charlie with 165. And so this week, ironically, I'm matching up against Danny in this matchup. So we got our guest picker against myself as well in the fantasy league, and that's projected to be close. And we got Nick versus Cody, Charlie, who was just unstoppable as of late against Carson, Matthew versus Andrew, Braden versus Max, and Zach versus Alex. And then you look at those standings there, that is a lot of interesting matchup. You look at this side, and we got just kind of a lot of okay. There's nobody that's really unbelievable, and there's nobody that's really bad. And then you go to the other side, they have two teams. We got an 8-1 and a 6-3, and then it's all 3-6 and below. I mean, that is incredible what is happening in these standings. But Alex has got to get set because he's currently 2-7, and that's not where you want to be if you don't want to have to do a punishment at the end. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's selection of NFL picks. We'll be back in the future with more of them. Enjoy the rest of your week and the weekend watching some football.